roll call, please?
Catching up here.
Sorry. Oh, sorry, were we not recording yet?
It's recording.
Recording in progress.
Okay, well, let's call this meeting to order again. So for Thursday, March 21st, 2024, can we start with a roll call, please?
Chair Cooney,
Present.
Vice Chair Snyder, Commissioner Keller, Commissioner Davis,
Here.
Commissioner Young,
Here.
Council Liaison Sneddon.
Okay. Do we have any changes to the agenda?
Chair Cooney, there are no changes to the agenda.
Fantastic. Do we have any public comment?
There is no public comment.
Great. Okay, let's get started with the consent items, please. We have the minutes from the last meeting.
And B, the
and
pre-bid
B.
construction management.
Oh, 100%. Great. Do we have a move to accept the minutes?
I move that I approve of the consent calendar.
Well, I can't vote on the minutes, so.
Yeah, you can. That's actually changed under Robert Rules of Order. As long as you didn't have to be at the meeting in order to do that.
Okay.
Yeah, tell you the truth, I chair 3 other committees, so. That is a change with the Robert Rules within the last year and a half.
So that's been embedded in the rules the
Yep.
whole time?
Yep.
Okay. All right, I'll second it.
Can we have a vote, please?
Commissioner Young,
Yes.
Commissioner Davis,
Yes.
Chair Cooney.
Yes. Okay, we'll consider that approved and move on to, hold on, let me just check that off. And, gotta pretend. And can we move on to the pre-bid construction management services and constructability review for the Cater Water Treatment Plant Reservoir Resiliency Project? That is a
That was
mouthful.
part of the consent calendar.
Okay, oh, sorry, I thought they were, is it part of the consent calendar? Okay, I'm so sorry about that. Okay, so we've done that, minutes, calendar, and let's move to the administrative items, please, starting with 6A, the Water Affordability and Conservation Study and Recommended Prioritization.
Okay, thank you. My name is Gabrielle Cook, and I'm the Water Resources Financial Officer. And welcome. Good morning. So this morning, we're going to go over the Water Affordability and Conservation Study and also staff recommendation for our prioritization of the recommendations that came out of the study. With the rising cost of water across the country, we decided to initiate a study, an affordability study. So in the spring of 2023, we partnered with the Alliance for Water Efficiency to conduct this water affordability and conservation study. We are wrapping up this report, so we're going to give you a little summary of the study, and then at the end of the presentation, we'll have the staff prioritization of the recommendations. And so we're looking for your input on those recommendations on that prioritization list. So at the end, we will be asking for that. But first, we are going to go over some of the study main points, because the last time we saw this was in January of this year. Okay, so California has some affordability assessment metrics. However, they look at affordability on a community-wide scale, and that can sometimes mask some of the affordability issues that we see at a more granular level. And so this study, we look at the census tract level and the household incomes. We included both the single and multifamily customers in this study.
Real quick, I just want to jump in and let the commission know we do have the authors of the study on with us. So if they do have any questions specifically about the study, they are available. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Hagmark. Yes, so we included both the single and multifamily customer analysis because we felt it was really important to capture that multifamily story. AWA looked at the water and wastewater bills, and we we realize that these are just a small part of a larger affordability concern within the community. So we want to look at affordability and how it's impacting our customers. So the study used a couple of different indicators for determining affordability. And so the first one is this HBI, or the average household burden indicator. And so this basically calculates what percent of the water and wastewater bill the lowest 20th percentile is paying on their bills. So here we have a couple of heat maps of the city of Santa Barbara. On the left-hand side, this blue map, it shows the average annual water and wastewater bill by census tract. So you'll notice that the lighter blue color, the average annual combined bill is less than $600 or $50 a month. And then if you look at the darker colors, that's going to indicate an average bill of over $2,200 a year, or a little over $180 a month. The middle map, the orange map, it shows the lowest quintile, so the lowest 20th percentile of income by census tract. So you can see there's quite a variety. So the lightest orange, that lowest 20th percentile of household income, is between 15 and 30,000 a year. And then when you look at the darker orange, that's going to be above 60,000 for that same lowest 20th percentile within that census tract. And then the pink map on the right, that kind of combines the blue and the orange maps. And so that's going to give you your household burden indicator. So the lighter pink is showing that the households are paying less than 2% of their annual income on water and wastewater bills. And then the darker pink is showing that households are paying over 6%. And so this kind of speaks to the greater affordability concern within the community. So we're seeing differences. For households, they're spending between about 1% and 7% of their income on water and wastewater bills. And that is a relatively low percent compared to some other items, such as housing or groceries. So this chart is taking the analysis one step further, and it's looking at our prevalence of poverty compared to that HBI, compared to that percentage of income that housing, that households are spending on water and wastewater bills. So if you look at this chart, if there's a high percentage of income that's being spent on water and wastewater bills, and there's a high prevalence of poverty in that census tract, then there's going to be a very high burden for the water and wastewater bills. So currently, throughout the city of Santa Barbara, we have a lower than 7% HBI, so we're in that bottom row. So our highest burden is that moderate to high burden. So then the next map, it shows the poverty prevalence indicator by census tract. And again, the lighter color has the lower prevalence of poverty, and then the darker color is the greater prevalence of poverty, the 50 to 60% of poverty within that census tract. And then the map on the right, it shows the census tracts that are shifting into a higher affordability burden. A higher affordability burden category. The lighter orange shows the low burden, and then the higher burden is shown in the darker orange colors. And again, from the prior slide, the city of Santa Barbara, the highest burden indicator that we have is that moderate high burden. So we don't have the high or very high, but we do have a couple of tracks where it's kind of on the cusp. So we wanted to see how our proposed rates for fiscal year 24 to 28 would change this story. And so we had a couple of assumptions with this map and the chart on the right. So we assumed that there would be a 5% increase in income over the 4-year period. So that's not 5% every year, that's 5% total over that 4-year period. And then we also assumed that council would adopt the highest noticed rates. The next presentation that we have is going to go in much more detail about our proposed rates, but this is assuming that council adopts our highest rates for the next 4 years. And then it also assumes that water sales are going to remain kind of in that fiscal year 23 level. So we do see that there are 3 census tracts that moved from the moderate high to the high burden category. And then there are a couple others that moved from a low burden to a moderate low burden. So a part of the affordability study, it was important for the city to conduct outreach and to kind of get a pulse on what the community thought about affordability, water affordability in particular. And so we had a community workshop, and we had a community survey. We conducted individual phone conversations, and then we had a 1-month period open for public feedback on that draft report. So we had that available on our website January 12th through February 16th. But we didn't receive a lot of feedback on the report. We did want to highlight some of the outreach that we did because we feel that we put a lot of effort into our outreach component. First, we created our affordability webpage, and so that housed all of our relevant information about the project. It had links to the different the different water commission meetings. It had links to the survey, to the draft report, and it will have the final report housed on there as well. For our in-person community workshop, we did outreach to our 22 local community organizations. So during our enhanced urban water management plan, we identified 22 stakeholders and we built relationships with the stakeholders. And so we wanted to utilize that, and so we reached out to them by phone and email. There was initial interest, but it kind of fizzled in the end. We did meet with the council members, Oscar and Alejandra Gutierrez, on outreach strategies, and they were appreciative of the efforts that we were making, and we have plans to work with them in the future with some of our outreach for the recommendations. For the in-person community workshop, with the press releases, with our information to the stakeholders, we also posted it online in the city newsletters, but we had 9 participants. So that 9 number included staff. So we knew that we needed to kind of double down on our effort to get some more participation in that survey, in the affordability water survey. So we posted it on our website, we posted it on the news and brief, we had social media platforms, we worked with the Santa Barbara Unified School District and put it in their e-newsletter. We had bilingual staff canvass the lower income communities, and they posted and spoke with community members and posted flyers in 30 community spaces throughout that area that they canvassed. And so it included churches, markets, restaurants, community centers, and so forth. And we also posted it in the Central and East Side libraries. So we felt that we put a lot of effort into this, and we were really hopeful that we would get some good feedback. We did. We got 74 respondents to the survey. However, it was predominantly English-speaking homeowners that responded, who were, a little bit older, so they had time to take the surveys. But what we did hear from the community from these surveys is that water affordability is just one piece of a high cost of living challenge faced by residents in this community. It's one piece. We understand that it is an important piece, and so we are working to make it more affordable, but it is just one piece. The community is concerned about supply challenges stemming from drought, population growth, climate conditions. Only 17% of our multifamily dwelling units are individually metered. So that means that only 17% of renters in those buildings are getting individual bills. And so we did get feedback that we could provide better transparency or education as to how our bills work, specifically for those communities. And then finally, community feels that despite their efforts to conserve, the water bills are still high. The study found that the city does have some good practices. We are already conducting some really good smart practices or best practices, and they range from rate structure to metering to billing, water conservation, and community engagement. So a couple areas to highlight is that our first tier water is relatively low compared to our highest tier water. We provide multiple ways to pay bills. And then we also have dedicated staff and a dedicated program for conservation. And then we do translate outreach material into Spanish. That's another thing I forgot to mention is that the survey and the website and the outreach materials were in Spanish and English, and we had an interpreter at our in-person workshop. Okay, so in summary, when you look at Santa Barbara at the community-wide level, there appear to be no affordability challenges. But when you drill down and look at it more at the census tract level, it reveals that affordability, there's concerns. And so the city is already conducting a number of best practices, but there is always room to improve, and we do want to improve. And the recommendations that the AWE came up with, there were 17 recommendations, and they were broken down into 3 categories: basic rate structure, water conservation, and customer assistance. So we went through those recommendations. The recommendations in the PowerPoint and the slide here are condensed a little bit. It's not word for word for what's in the report, but you can find that in the report. But we wanted to make it a little bit easier to discuss. So these are our highest priority items. They are what we feel are some of them are relatively simple and easy to implement. And some of them are already items that we have in progress, such as leveraging AMI data to target water conservation and messaging, or AMI and water smart communication. We want to target that to account holders in low income and multifamily settings. But if you want to summarize these top priority categories, it's improving communication, education, outreach to low-income multifamily, and then also developing a low-income assistance program. The second tier of our priority are the medium priority items, and these items take a little bit more time and analysis to implement. So these are going to be more in line of leveraging the data that we already collected to help identify low income or otherwise vulnerable households that could be using water inefficiently. We could work with residents and community-based partners to review our practices to see where there's barriers potentially for entry into some of our conservation programs or our billing programs, any of those. And then finally, in this section, it's to implement an indoor water efficiency focused program. The third tier priority, these may require policy action. several of them would be better addressed as part of our next rate study. There are a couple feasibility concerns, and there's a concern that there might be potential high workload to affordability payoff. So these priorities are mainly, the top two are going to be for our next rate study. It's looking at the fixed charges. And we already had a discussion, I think last month or the month before, about our fixed to volumetric structure. And so we'll be looking at that. And then the other items are exploring other communication methods. And then finally, our fourth tier priority items, they must be explored in the context of a rate study. And these are all pretty intensive and structural changes to rates. And so we need more time to evaluate these and to investigate these. So our next steps is staff is seeking Water Commission recommendation and approval of the staff recommended prioritization of these recommendations that came out of the water affordability report. And then once we get consensus on that, we will return to Water Commission in the summer with our action plan and our implementation updates. Any questions?
Thank you. I'm interested if staff has considered looking at people's timeliness in paying their monthly water bills to see if that provides any information on potential hardship or burden, in addition to looking at income levels, but to actually see how people are responding to paying bills.
I'll take a stab at that, and then we can, and people can add on to that. So it has been a challenge. We still have a unusual amount of customers who have not paid their bills or who are not paying their bills. We are now finally shutting off services for non-payment. We have been pushing now for almost a year our low-income LEWOP, which is an assistance program to help people get caught up if they meet certain income requirements. I think there's a lot of people who have just been taking advantage of the fact that they don't have to pay and there's no penalty for paying, which has been unfortunate. And finance has been trying to get this automated, but right now they're having to do them all by hand. And we have, I don't know, over 300 customers who have just decided not to pay. And so we're now issuing them letters. And as you might guess, when we threaten to turn off and do turn off their service, they pay. But we're only able right now to do, I forget the number is, about 20 a week. So it's pretty slow going. But it has given us an insight, but it's difficult to make any, I think before the pandemic, it'd be a little more clean to look at that. Those people that are paying the penalties, maybe the folks on the cusp really struggling, and maybe how can we channel them into programs, because we do have current programs to kind of help them. They can get relief from the UUT tax on their bill if they meet certain income requirements. And then we do have certain payment programs to help them spread those costs over several months. But right now I think have a lot of people in there that are just taking advantage of the situation and decided not to pay.
So what I'm looking at is to see if you've cross-referenced that data, these 300 people, or the bigger population that may be a month or two late, against the census tracts that you've identified as being of having a high burden.
I don't, Liesl, did you hear that question?
I can take a stab at this.
Go for it.
So this census tract information is pretty new to us, and so I don't think that we've had the time or the ability yet to cross-reference that with our billing staff.
Fair enough. I was just curious because maybe it provides some kind of information that might be helpful in this
Yeah.
overall analysis.
Yeah.
The other question I have is in looking at census tracts, which have now allowed us to see that there are small pockets in the community that have a high burden. I just want to make sure it's true that that doesn't mean someone in a tract that has a very, if the tract has a low burden, you could still have people in that tract that are experiencing a high burden themselves. Correct?
That's absolutely correct.
Yeah,
Yeah. I think this just allows us some granularity because there's privacy concerns as well, but this census tract has been kind of for us the first glimpse into this is a very wealthy community. Well, yeah, for some it is, but not everyone. And I think this has kind of given us kind of a glimpse into, but it absolutely by no means says that there isn't people living outside of those census tracts that aren't also struggling as well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Liesl, did you capture Commissioner Young's question about whether or not we did any, because I do know that you looked at people that were paying the penalties, late penalties, versus the census tracts?
Yes, great question. Yeah. We didn't have that. We had the information about LIWAP and folks that participated in LIWAP. And so interesting to see some differences in distribution across there compared to where we're seeing burden. So to the point of, yes, there are folks that are probably experiencing challenges across the community. They just tend to be more concentrated in some of the census tracts that we identified through the analysis. We didn't have, in part because of we had some information about the payment plans, but kind of at a large scale is what you'll see in the sort of a summary. And I think partly because in talking with staff, they also iterated what was, I think, just shared a moment ago, that because of the nature of how payment and late fees and shutoffs have changed over the last years, and there's effectively been no stick to the situation, that it might not be a great indicator right now from that data of who might be really truly struggling to pay their bills versus who were maybe taking advantage of the convenience of not having a penalty to pay their bills. But we did talk about how moving forward, as you reinstate shutoffs or other late fees, that it would be really interesting to track that data and compare it to this analysis.
And I think the other one you found was that for those who were paying the late fees, they were from the census tracts where we are seeing the highest, say HBI. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We didn't map out where the folks paying the late fees, the payment plans or late fees. It was more about the LIWAP participation, the Low Income Assistance Program participation. So we didn't have the data to be able to map them into the census tracts like we did for the Low Income Payment Assistance.
Okay, thank you.
Program.
And just for reference, page 50 of the report has the LIWAP map.
Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Crystal. Okay. I have a comment and then a question. The comment is, I really appreciated in today's presentation your thinking on the priorities. We didn't have that in the staff report, and that actually helped crystallize for me, because that kind of was one of the questions I had coming in. But you did a good job in basically outlining that on the slides that we saw today. And then in the report, it says, once the prioritization's been set, you're going to return to the Water Commission with recommended actions. My other question was originally, right, of all the things we have here, right, what are the two things which might have the most effect? And I'm assuming then when you come back with actions, you'll be prioritizing the priorities in that regard to do that. And then lastly, question. The goal here, it's hard for me to get my arms around how will we reach the vulnerable households in the multifamily categories. Again, that's the nut that's here for us, and I can't find it yet. So I'm hoping that as we go farther into this in implementing actions. And to that degree, in the study itself, it showed a lot of examples of what other communities and providers are doing. but I didn't really find that what has been most effective in reaching those goals in those other communities. So those are just comments and questions that I put out there, not necessarily for answer today, but when we do come back. Thank you.
Yeah, and we have reached out to our rental housing mediation, to tenants groups, landlord groups, and so we are exploring what can be done and what can legally be done at this point. So that is top of mind for us.
What I do appreciate about it is, even at the state level, this is a really good conversation, because the multifamily is a difficult one. And, you know, some of the things that we're going to be talking about is what can we do to help potentially subsidize that fixed meter charge, because that doesn't take away the carrot to encourage conservation still, which is what we don't want to take away, but it's certainly that initial costs we can help out there. And the big question is, how much will that help? And that's some of the things we want to explore and bring back to you. And then the other one is, should we head down a program in which, you know, we're sending, for example, a property owner who has multiple tenants, we're giving them some type of discount on their bill? How can we ensure that ultimately ends up showing up on the tenants? And it just has an administrative burden that we haven't been able to crack. And I think that's what we're struggling with, because we don't have a relationship with those customers, which is really challenging. So I don't know. I think this is gonna be an ongoing conversation, and I'm hopeful that this is a priority for them too, and together we'll figure out a way. I mean, really, you've heard this probably in many forums, but this kind of minimum income, like putting cash in people's hands, honestly may be the best answer to addressing a lot of these concerns in the affordability range. And maybe we could participate somehow in that program. The state is offering $700 or whatever a month. We can contribute somehow to that, and that could be the means in which we can help out the multifamilies.
Thank you. Yeah. First, just a question, maybe comment. So when we're looking at the census tracts and those maps, all of the heat maps, even though not a district, but a census tract might look really small, it has the same number of people as a huge district up on the Riviera. And I think it's a little bit like all of these, but on the slide 7, it might look like, maybe slide 8? It looks like slide 7 on ours. Yeah, this one. That may look like a small geographical area, but is that maybe 50% or more of the population of the city, or what is the, in number of people percentage?
The census tracts are about 4,000.
So, just looking at, I'm just really familiar with the, 501 up there, and, that has as many people in it as, census tract 9. So that it spread out differently. So do you know, those added up, these in yellow, what percentage of the city that is? Is it about 50%?
I could do them.
Or,
Yeah.
25% of the city's population. Okay. So then I think that just as a comment, I really appreciate the priority on how we can develop some low-income assistance program and this issue with multifamily and how difficult that is and the cost burden. And part of that too is that in these areas in particular, you might have 15 people in one unit, and that might have appear to be an artificially high water usage per person, but it's because of overcrowding situation. And so I don't know how exactly, when you say put cash in people's hands, there may be issues then with, well, who's the leaseholder, who's holding the subleases, who's charging their subleasers within 15 people in a unit. So that it gets the trickle down of that and how to get that to people. And I'm just this is just a comment, but this is something that I continue to see that a rent cap could help with, that, you know, you can't just pass that on to your tenants and artificially high water bill or the other bills that are going up too. But I realize that's outside the purview here, except for it plays into that how those costs are being passed on to renters, and particularly in those areas where there is overcrowding. So I don't know how you get to the benefit to people who are actually being charged for it. But really amazing report and presentation. Thank you.
This might not be an easy question to answer, but you said earlier that 17% of renters in multifamily homes get individual bills. Is that something that it's like, that's more of an older building or a newer building? Like, so if I'm a renter getting an individual bill, am I in a new, nice apartment? Am I in an old one that hasn't been updated in a while? Like, is there any way to track, like, can you characterize something about that 17% in terms of income?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at it, and if
Income?
Dana has any more insights, because she deals a lot with these folks. So yes, it's a lot of older housing stock, because since the early 90s, late 80s, we have been requiring individual metering of dwelling units. But as you may or may not be aware, it is an ongoing challenge for some of these large developments to put enough city water meters in the public right-of-way. We have experimented over the years with having metering rooms on private property. Those have been a mess, and we
Right.
really want to avoid those. We really like, as messy as it looks in the frontage, we like to have individually metered city water meters so that we have a relationship with each and one of those customers. A challenge that's come back around again. A lot of the developers, again, trying to save costs, deliver affordable housing, want to put in central boilers. Well, they put in a central boiler. It's difficult to do individual metering. They really want to do what's called sub-metering, so on their property, but then that requires the property owner or HOA to now read meters once a month and bill their tenants, and we're out of that relationship, and we don't have now a connection with those customers. It's messy. I don't know how well they'll maintain those meters, the accuracy of those meters, whether or not they do it. They're required to do it, but we do not have the oversight to manage that. And so that is an ongoing challenge, as we really want to see individual city metered units so that we can keep that conversation with them going, and they'll know exactly what they're paying for water and wastewater service.
Yeah,
Great question, though. I
can't-
really, really appreciate that
well,
question.
I almost I can't connect this as like a fully formed thought, so sorry, but like I was looking at table 12 on page 48 of the bigger packet here, instead of the slides. And like one of the things that kind of stands out here is like, and I'm gonna make an assumption that is, I hope, appropriate, that like a lower income house would not have their water usage as dependent, especially in like a multifamily situation, on like drought conditions, because most of your water usage is indoors. That feels like a fair thing to say. So like one of the things here, you know, is like as an indoor water conservation energy, you know, whatever, would be low flow toilet replacement. But like, how do you sell that to someone if they're having trouble paying their water bill, and is providing like at cost or very low cost, low flow toilets to people something we could think about, or other things like that, where it might be, like, I totally agree that cash in hand is fantastic, but in terms of like giving people a tool to lower their bill, like it says here that if you move from like a 1.6 to 0.8 gallon per flush, you could save $2,300 a year, which is pretty significant in someone's bill. But if they can't afford the $200 or so plus installation up front, then it's not worth knowing about that. Like, is that something we could, or, you know, any kind of low flow fixture or appliance that would help people conserve indoors, if we could remove the barrier to purchase that? Is that a crazy thought? And can we somehow also then connect that to people that are maybe living in older buildings and don't have their individual bill, which I know then they're not the ones paying it, but bear with me, right? Like I said, it's not a fully formed thought. It's just kicking around in my brain as we're talking about this.
No, and I'll have Ms. Hoffenberg chime in on this as well. But I think you're on to something, because I know that SCE has a program, PG&E have a similar. they don't care if you own the property or not. They would come in, if you qualify,
Right.
they'll come in and do energy efficiency improvements. And I certainly think that's something we can continue to explore. I think it gets kind of messy in the multifamily because we want to see that ultimately come
Right.
down to the tenant. So with that, I don't know if Ms. Hoffenberg or
You're getting the full slew of people here. My name is Dana. No, you're good. My name is Dana Hoffenberg. I'm a water resources analyst. I'll speak briefly to the separate metering requirements that we have, and then I'm going to let Ms. Wood talk to our toilet programs. So yes, to your original question, our separate metering ordinance was put into place in the early 90s. So generally speaking, the buildings that have individual city water meters are newer. And older housing stock, maybe ones that were built 50s, 60s, something like that, they generally tend to be what we call master metered, where there's one big meter serving all of the tenants on the property. So yeah, to your question, the newer individually metered units are probably newer, maybe nicer, depends on who the landlord is. And yes, the extremely high density housing, where there's 90 units or something like that on State Street, we can't fit 90 meters. So they tend to have to default to private submetering, where then it's the landlord or the property owner that's managing that billing relationship with the customers. So we try to make sure that it only defaults to private submetering and goes outside of the hands of the city when there's physical constraints that don't allow us to put our city meters in the right of way. So we try and make sure that we manage the relationship with our customers to the greatest extent possible. And I'll let Mrs. Wood talk to our toilet rebates.
Thank you. So Chair Cooney, my name is Madeline Wood, Water Conservation Analyst. As you saw in the report, we did have a long-standing rebate program with toilets, but as the plumbing code changed, we removed it because that's all you could purchase. So the incentive was, rather than going with a standard, more water-using toilet, we will incentivize you and decrease some of the cost to upgrade to a more efficient one. So when that's all you could find in the stores, that's when we sunsetted that program. But what we have looked at through our water conservation strategic plan is going to a ultra high efficiency, which is that 0.8. So what you still buy in the stores is 1.28, but the 0.8 is far above. And if most of our housing stock and our toilets are about 1.6, you could cut that in half in some cases. So to your point about the targeting the disadvantaged communities and the high burdened households, one of the recommendations in the report and one of the things we've kicked around is if we could have some sort of direct install program, because a rebate is only helpful if you have the money up front. And so there are other programs. Sometimes you can combine it with the SoCal Gas, and they have different ways that they income qualify people that we can hopefully just hook onto, because there is a high administrative burden when we are trying to qualify people. But those types of programs where it is a direct install, where they don't have to find their own plumber, pay the cost up front, is something that we are interested in, as well as leak repair. I think that's something with AMI that we need to be really aware of, is when we're telling people that they have a leak and the plumber's $250 to come out, that might be something that we want to look at, helping people cover the costs of plumbers doing repairs. Because all we can do is tell them and try to help them with some helpful things, but we can't come out and fix their leak for them. We have as many tools as we can provide, but that can also be a high cost.
Great, thank you. Any more questions or comments from the committee? Do we have any public comment?
There's no public comment.
Okay, so I think that.
You have a recommendation?
Oh, yes, we do. That is a.
So I move to approve the recommendation.
Second.
Let's have a vote, please.
And if the motion could include to have staff return with recommendations on implementing actions.
Yeah.
Commissioner Young,
Yes.
Commissioner Davis,
Yes.
Commissioner Keller,
Yes.
Chair Cooney.
Yes. Okay, so let's move on to administrative item 6B, the approval of final water, wastewater, and solid waste rate notice.
So I'll start this off. This is an interesting staff report because we will be adding in solid waste when we go to Finance Committee on April 9th and City Council on April 9th. So you'll notice it kind of flows a little funny because we do, and we'll get them inserted in here. So it'll be a comprehensive view of the entire city utility bill. But we've got a pretty in-depth conversation for you today, and presentation, I should say. Lots of good slides to try and put this all in perspective. We have made a lot of progress since the last time we were here. We slowed the process down because of the unique nature of the increase in revenue that we were looking at. Really went back through item by item, and we're able to significantly, in some cases, reduce it. Still a lot. I'm not going to hide that part. But we really are trying to meet the community halfway on this, in the sense that we really do still want to deliver the service that I think they expect, and head off potential problems in the future if we don't address those issues now. So we've tried to build that in here, and then also try and, ease the burden. You will notice when we get through this presentation that the overall bill impacts, although still significantly high, have come down quite a bit, because the way these, and we talked about this, the way the revenues impact, at least in this first year, aren't uniform. So we'll dive into that. And with that, I'll turn it over to, I'll turn it over to Mr. Cord from HDR.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Cooney, Water Commission, Council Liaison Sneddon. Sean Korn with HDR Engineering. As Mr. Hegmark just mentioned, we'll walk you through, again, just kind of the rate study overview real briefly, talk a little bit about the status. As he alluded to, staff has been working very hard going through the process, evaluating some of those impacts given the feedback that you all provided us, as well as the Finance Committee and City Council. And we've worked through some of the analysis, and now we have the full meal deal. So if you remember, it's a 3-step process. We have all 3 steps that we'll be walking through and talking about our recommendations as we go through that, and then touch on next steps. So as you remember, really the purpose of our rate study is to come back and develop a sufficient and adequate level of revenue to operate and maintain both the water and wastewater systems as we go through this. Now, one of those key elements, and really the focus of the rate study, is to come back and develop cost-based and proportional rates, and coming back to our Proposition 218 requirements, which also governs some of the discussion y'all just had on how you want to go through an affordability program or customer assistance program. That also limits the ability of how you may do that as well. Now, as we go through this, again, remember, we are looking at rates for a 4-year period, but we developed the analysis for a 10-year period. And part of that is reviewing some of the key financial planning metrics. So looking at adequate debt service coverage ratios. Since there is existing debt, we are looking at future debt. Maintaining an adequate level of funding of capital on a pay-as-you-go basis. So the first time I was here, 2 times ago when I was here, we talked about that reinvestment in both the water and wastewater system, and what is that prudent level. And then maintaining council policy reserves, which is a key topic for today as we go through this, given some of the feedback we received from the council when we presented this to them a couple weeks ago. And then we do develop the study based on generally accepted methodologies, but they're tailored to your system and customer characteristics. So that 3-step process to meet those requirements is a revenue requirement, cost of service, and rate design. The revenue requirement is our financial plan, provides the overall cost basis for the rates or the level of the rates. Cost of service is our Prop 218 proportionality. Why does it cost something different or have a different rate for a different type of customer, residential versus commercial, as an example? And based on those 2 analyses, we then develop our proposed rates. So starting off on our revenue requirement, remember this is really focused on our operating and capital needs. As we've discussed, our costs have continued to increase since the prior water and wastewater rate studies, plus the impact of the recent significant inflationary trends that we saw over the last couple of years. And then part of the driver here is also driving our council policy levels. As we looked at the capital, thinking about the overall bigger picture on the water side, we have some key drivers with the water main replacement program, the costs associated with that, as we've talked about in the past. On the wastewater side, we have had some changes, as we discussed last time we were here, as we spread some projects out to be able to accomplish those along with the existing ongoing projects. And then ultimately coming back to our rate projections for fiscal year 2025 through fiscal year 2028, so that 4-year rate setting period. So just a quick reminder here on the wastewater revenue requirement. Remember, a revenue requirement sums our O&M expense, our operating and maintenance expenses. That's the gray or black bar on the bottom. We do have some pay-as-you-go. That's the blue middle slice. There's a little bit of reserve funding in there. That's the orange. And then our debt service, which is the green top part of that bar. And then the dashed black line, essentially horizontal across the screen, is our current level of revenue. So as you can see, as we go along farther, absent rate adjustments, we would be unable to meet even our O&M expenses on an annual basis. So that's building off our projection of O&M plus those capital needs that we have. Just to talk a little bit about where we are, given the changes we discussed with you all, Finance Committee and the Council. One of the questions was, how do we meet the Council reserve policy and how could that impact the overall level of rates? So when we brought this to Finance and Council, then one of the questions was, well, what happens if you stretch that out a little more? So in the last presentation that the Water Commission saw, through fiscal year 2028, the green bars touched the dashed line, and that dashed line is our target minimum reserve policy, which is made up of 25% of our O&M. That's our disaster and contingency reserve component. And then it's made up of our capital reserve policy, which is the lesser of 5% of our asset value, or average of 3 years of capital less debt funded capital. In this case, the 3 years less debt funded is our lower component, but that is why you see a little trend up from 25 to 26, is we have some additional capital in there. So given that discussion that we had, we stretched out meeting the council policy reserves until 2030. As a point of reference here, this chart does include additional wastewater rate adjustments in fiscal year 29 and 30 to reach our minimum targets. So it's our current plan for the next 4 years, fiscal year 25 through 28, plus some additional adjustments, which, by the way, came up from some of the data you saw in the past because we're lowering where we are today. So we've got to get to that same point, so balancing that out as we go forward. Same approach on the water side. We're summing our annual O&M, which is the gray or black on the bottom, the rate funded capital, which is our blue in the middle. You see, again, a few slices of reserve funding. Again, really that goes into reserves as being used. And then our annual debt service going out into the future. And then our our current revenues based on current rates going forward. Now, again, that is flat across the screen here. We've only assumed minimal consumption for both water and wastewater on the multifamily side in this 4-year period based on some of the ongoing development. This is a very similar picture to what you saw before on the water side as far as meeting reserve targets. On the water side, we dropped down in this next fiscal year with the proposed rate adjustments we have. We almost reach it in fiscal year 28. Just slightly below, and then we do reach that in 29 and 30. We're really only showing 29 or 30 here just to have consistency with our wastewater chart. But overall, we're meeting our overall target policy over the time period we reviewed. So what does this all mean? Again, as we've shown, rate adjustments are necessary to fund our annual operating and capital needs. It's that inflationary increases to annual O&M as well as the capital side. As we've talked about, our capital costs have increased more than expected given the inflationary pressures on supplies, services, and costs associated with implementing capital projects. We've had some budgeting changes on the allocated cost side, the insurance, IT, fleet, and then overall capital needs. So the current recommended annual revenue adjustment is 9.5% per year for 4 years for wastewater, and then you can see 2 years of 10.5% for water, followed by a 10%. How that compares is on the next slide. So if you remember, and I'll actually take you back one more, the top part is the wastewater. The initial wastewater analysis, we were looking at 17% in the first 2 years. And then working with staff, talking through with finance and other staff at the city, we worked through that process and brought that down. What we presented in February was the 10.5, 10, 10, 9.5, and then where we are at today with 9.5s across the board. Similar to wastewater on the water side, our initial analysis was the 14%. Refined, we brought that down to the 12, 12, 9, 9, and then today we're at the 10.5, 10.5, 10, 10. Now, looking at the February 24 to March 24, the bottom two lines here on the water side, that changed from 9 to 10 in fiscal year 27, 28. That's that pressure, right? We're pushing down, so we need to get to that same point, so we had to push up a little bit in those out years to try and smooth that out, and then ultimately meet our total operating and capital needs, as well as the reserve policy as we get out through 29, 30, and 31. So that's the revenue requirement update based on what you all have seen, the work staff has done going through this, the comments we've all received to move this forward. Now we'll step into the next two steps, which is our cost of service. That's our proportional allocation, our proportional distribution of costs between the customer classes and then the subsequent rates based on that cost of service. So remember, when you think through a cost of service, our goal here and the purpose is to allocate costs based on why they are incurred. So when we think about water, it's based on our average day water use. So how does that average day use vary from a single family home to a commercial customer to an irrigation customer? The bigger driver in this discussion, though, is our cost of water supply. It's that resource stacking component that drives the tier pricing as we go forward, as well as the customer component, which comes back to that monthly fixed charge and the costs associated with providing those customer-related costs. On the wastewater side, it's volume, so the effluent wastewater coming to El Estero to be treated, and then the strength of that wastewater. So the nastier it is, the more costly and harder it is to treat. That's really driven by some of the industry, your higher strength commercial. So the waste coming from a restaurant, as an example, is harder to treat than your typical waste from your single family home or your multifamily home. And then there again is the customer related component to that. So when we think through that, we go through each cost for both water and wastewater to determine which of those components is this related to. And then we distribute those costs proportionally to each customer class based on the benefit or proportionality that they receive from that. So the easy one is number of customers, right? If we have $100 and we have 100 customers, then it's $1 each customer, right? That's the easy math on the customer. When we get into water resource stacking, it gets a little more challenging because we have the prioritization of what tier receives what water, and on wastewater, it's the strength component. On the wastewater side, we've seen some minimal cost differences. One of the things I talk about is every time you do a cost of service study, we're going to see some changes between our customer classes because things have changed since the last study. So we've got a couple years since the last wastewater. We've got 4 years since the last water study. So customer characteristics have changed. The city's costs have changed. So that allocation has changed as part of that. So on wastewater, things look really good overall from a cost of service technical perspective. The one exception to that is our commercial class, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, our basic commercial class, in a minute here. The water, there are some differences, and there are some changes to the tier pricing based on how you have incurred costs to provide water service, driven really by our water supply components as part of that. Ultimately, when it comes down to the end of the cost of service, it provides us with average unit costs. So cost per equivalent meter per month and cost per tier on the water side. Wastewater side, it gives us our total cost per meter, equivalent meter for our fixed charge plus our consumption or volume charge on the wastewater side. Those are the rates for year one. That's our requirement in Proposition 218 is to come back and say, here's our calculation, here's our math to get to this number. Years 2 through 4 are then the percentage adjustments that you saw in the revenue requirement. So all rate components go up by that amount. Then you'll do another rate study at some point in the future, and again, you reset these relationships. So just to provide you with a summary or an example of what this looks like, and the scale gets a little out of control here, but wanted to give you an idea of what it is when we allocate our costs, we then compare that to our current revenue, just to provide a means of evaluating what that difference is. So the black bar, or the first bar on the left, is our current revenue on average for each class. The blue bar is the distributed cost, so what that cost allocation results in. For our class as a service for wastewater, it's residential, commercial, commercial high strength, and then there's our high strength surcharge. So we have a different rate between our domestic strength commercial versus our high strength commercial. Then there also is another surcharge program for those that are above the levels that are supposed to be discharged into the city's wastewater system. And that's charged based on the constituents that make up that wastewater strength. And we calculate that in the cost of service as well. What you can see here is the vast majority of your costs and revenue are residential, and that's a combined single family and multifamily component. Commercial makes up a little bit more, and then you don't even see a line here. Again, the scale. High strength surcharges are pretty minimal. They're a small component of the overall revenue and cost allocation. Same approach on the water side. When we look at the cost of service, we have a couple different classes of service. This is really driven by our overall water supply tier pricing calculation, the resource stacking to determine what those prices are. But again, residential, single family, and multifamily are our primary revenue and cost allocation components. You'll see in here recycled water. Just as a note, those recycled water costs are pulled out right off to the side, and those are pure costs related to recycled water. We then have our commercial and industrial, which are our typical customers, and then we have our different irrigation customers: irrigation agriculture, irrigation recreation, irrigation urban. And those are split out because we have different rates for them based on the water supply that is allocated to them through the prioritization process. And then we have private fire service. That's the sprinkler lines going in. There's a cost of providing service to that. You've upsized the system to meet those demands, so that follows those costs along with it. So, yes, Commissioner Young.
Question, if I could. So other than the size difference in a meter that might be for ag versus residential, what other cost components are different?
Yeah, so very good question. It comes back to how the water supply is allocated. So back years ago, 2017 I think it was, council prioritized our sources. So groundwater, surface water, purchase water, desal water. And it lists who receives what level of water. So as an example, irrigation agriculture is primarily groundwater only. That is our lowest cost of water. And so that's allocated to them. When you get into irrigation recreation and irrigation urban, now you're starting to get into some of the other supplies of surface water, or the treated water from Cater as an example, or you get into the state purchase water component. So that's where we end up with different rates because they're supplied by different sources as part of that.
But isn't all of that water commingled? It's all treated the same?
Yes, it is. Again, very good question. What we have to do from a cost perspective is when we look at the budget, we have different costs associated with providing groundwater or creating treated surface water or purchasing state water. So those costs are in the budget based on the typical year of how much water we use for each source. So there is a cost difference, and it's the method the city has used, and we use in this cost of service analysis to differentiate the pricing based on the level of service they're received. So their level of service is tied to the type of water that they're being provided. Now, you are correct. It's probably not a molecule for molecule, right? And different years may mean different sources, right? There may be years where the city will be pumping more groundwater or using more surface water or buying more or less state water. We actually did this study, a very detailed, I didn't, staff did, Dana as an example, did a very detailed analysis of where the historical water supplies have come from. And we actually updated the analysis this year to try and better reflect where we're going. We have the new urban water management plan that provides us with some additional information that we use this time to update that. Mr. Hagmark, did you want to add?
Yeah, I was just going to add, it's very similar to the electric markets. This community has chosen to have 100% carbon-free power delivered here, but the actual electric molecules that are electrons that we get are not necessarily that. So it is, I guess, a conceptual market, and then you also have electricity between 4 and 9 is more expensive. That being related to having to turn on more gas-fired plants or other things to augment that power grid. So very similar in some ways here. We haven't gotten into that time of use situation here, but it is the way, because we have such a diverse portfolio, we have chosen to approach this. You could just flatten it all out, come up with a uniform shared cost for all this, and then our tiers would be, there would be minor differences between the tiers, and obviously tier 1 would go way up.
So does this mean that we need to be pumping groundwater every month in order to supply ag? Because if I look at the water report, we're not using groundwater right now.
Right, and the way we've approached it, and again, kind of following the guidelines here, is at any given month, our supplies are shifting, right? Desal may go offline for maintenance, whatever it is. And so what the courts have upheld is we have a plan, and we recognize that in that plan, these are all part of our supply mix, and we may or may not use those supplies during this planning period.
So is there a period of time in which we have to utilize groundwater to satisfy the requirements of whatever they might be in terms of usage?
Our understanding of it is in the courts so far is as long as your plan is reasonable and you've laid that out, yes, you can make deviations from that. You're not required to stick to that plan as long as your plan is intuitively makes sense. It's not, we're not pulling more out of groundwater than it's capable of providing, right? The courts have upheld that that's a reasonable way to allocate costs. But your question is good, and that's when we're planning this out, like, this is our best guess at how our supply mix is going to fall out over the 4 years. It could vary based on climatic conditions.
And I do get the concept. It's
Yeah.
the same for San Luis Reservoir, where we
Yeah.
get 1,000 acre feet sent down to us.
Yeah.
We're not getting the actual molecules
Right.
of H2O that come down,
Right.
but we're getting water.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Oh, what did I do?
We
We're just
help.
getting to the fun part. Here, sorry.
That was weird. I keep thinking it's open and we just can't see it. Oh, really? Oh. Is this one of the perks of SharePoint Online?
Let's try that.
Thank you. Do 30, I think it was 40. Oh. That's not liking it. No. Oh, there you go. No. Guess we're just going down. I wonder if I can scroll. Let me try and scroll. We're just gonna scroll. It's not scrolling. That works. So it's a different PowerPoint.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. There we go.
It was
Thank
just
you.
on the hidden slide, so you can just.
What's that? Well, I hit. It was just hit the thing. Oh, I see what you're saying. Gotcha. Yes. Got it. Yep. Yes.
I know, we gotta wait.
Yes. Yeah. About half hour, probably. That's a little less. Yeah.
Ready?
Yeah, yes, let's continue.
Sorry about that. So now we know the overall level of revenues we need. We have the proportional distribution of cost to each of our customer classes. So now we can come to the designer rates. And again, as I mentioned, our cost of service gives us those unit costs. The charts just showed the total current revenue and distributed costs, but it ultimately gives us a cost per equivalent meter and a cost per tier or volumetric component for the wastewater side. So as we go through this, again, remember the study and the Proposition 218 process develops or calculates the maximum rates based on the analysis developed. So it folds in nicely to the discussion we just talked about based on our unit cost as part of that, as well as our overall revenue adjustments. At this time, we're not recommending any adjustments to the rate structure or how we're charging customers. We're looking at just changing the amount or the level of the rate that we're charging for the different customers. So as we talked about, on the water side, we have single-family, multifamily, commercial, and the irrigation. On the wastewater side, same single-family, multifamily, commercial, and then we have the high-strength and high-strength surcharges. Can you click on the screen for me with the mouse? There we go, thank you. So I'm going to go through these charts fairly, or the data tables fairly quickly and hit the graphs, gives you a better picture. These are the actual rates. This is wastewater. Single family, remember, it's the flat monthly fixed charge or base fee. Then we have a variable charge up to our cap. Our cap is 8 HCF. HCF is 100 cubic feet. Each 100 cubic feet is 748 gallons. So currently $27 plus $4.28 per HCF, and then you can see how that adjusts going out. For a fiscal year 25, here is that bill comparison, and again, we cap it at 8. If you use 10, it's still capped at 8 because that's the indoor use, the wastewater contribution component. So you can see the dollar change for those customers. So someone that is a low water user, we'll just pick the 4 in the middle, about a $4 per month change for next year. Your higher or highest user on the system is about a $5 per month change on the wastewater side for a single family customer. For the multifamily, it's the same charges as single family. This is a residential rate. Again, it's a flat fixed charge. However, on the multifamily side, it's for all water use, all HCF. But as a point of reference, the vast majority of our multifamily customers on a per unit component use less than 4 or right around 4 per living unit. So they are down on that lower end, and you can see here for those individually metered. So as we talked about earlier, there's about 17% of our multifamily customers that are individually metered. This would be that bill for those customers. So again, you can see about a $3 to $4 per month change for our individually metered multifamily customers. On the commercial side, it is the greater of the minimum charge or the volumetric charge. So down at the bottom here, you see your volume charge per 100 cubic feet. If that is less than the minimum charge in the upper table by meter size, then you pay the minimum charge. That is the vast majority of our commercial customers pay the minimum charge. So out of the 2,300-ish commercial customers, on average, about 200 to 300 of those customers actually get a bill every month. It starts going down fairly quickly. Now, I point this out because in the cost of service, this is the customer class that saw a higher increase. So looking at that volume charge, it goes from 527 to 656. This is going to impact those higher water use commercial customers greater than most of our other customer classes. Now, to put that into perspective, on this slide you see two charts. One is a low wastewater / water user for the wastewater rate. They use 6 HCF with a 5/8 inch meter. And on the right, you see a large water user using 80 HCF with a 1 inch meter. That 80 HCF is our typical lodging high use customer, so hotel type property. The left, the low use, is our median commercial user. So you see a large disparity between the actual water use and wastewater bill. Our average is about 28, thank you, HCF. Our median is 6 HCF, and our high is 80. So we have a lot of customers, again, that are just receiving the minimum bill, and then the handful of large water users that are going over. Compared to Ventura, Solvang, San Luis Obispo, you can see we're right there or lower for both the commercial median and the commercial high or hotel lodging customer. Again, just as a point of reference, Solvang went through a rate study 2 years ago. They have a couple years left on their 5-year rate, so that rate's going to go up. San Luis Obispo's in the second year of their 2-year, and they're planning on looking at rates again later on this year. As part of that, I'm not positive on Ventura, but again, everybody's going through this process right now. But again, overall, still fairly comparative, and commercial isn't a class we provided you all with some comparative information on. Yes, sir.
What question? In this graph, I don't see any notations for Goleta or Carpinteria or any.
I got one in a little bit.
Okay.
And I do appreciate you answering asking that question. One of the challenges is when we look around for comparables is most sanitary agencies don't have water use information, and so they just charge a flat fee based on what customer class they're in. And we'll show a little bit of that, but that is the hard comparison with trying to compare ourselves to sanitary districts. We just have a different approach to that.
And multiple agencies, right? We don't, like the city provides water and wastewater. We have Montecito Water, we have Montecito Sanitary. So 2 different agencies providing the same 2 services that you provide together. So there's some coordination and challenges there from a billing perspective for those different agencies. So on the commercial high strength, again, it's the minimum charge by meter size or a variable charge, the higher of the 2. In this case, the commercial high strength is kind of the average adjustment overall, no major changes here. And again, on the high strength or industrial side, we're not seeing as many minimum bills as part of this. It's really the larger commercial, so they are higher water use customers. The high strength charges, so these are based on the per pound, and the strength levels are based on testing, so going out and looking at the actual customers. BOD is biochemical oxygen demand, TSS is total suspended solids, and then ammonia. Those are our 3 constituents that are tested for and charged. So these are folks that are charged for going over the limits that they are supposed to be discharging into the city system. These are fairly minimal, as we looked at in the cost of service. And in the past, we've had some, I'll call them bad actors, but it's just the nature of what they do, that have fixed some of that. So we've actually seen these charges and these higher strength discharges come down in the past, since the prior study. Moving to the water side, and we've got some combined charts here at the end here, but moving to water, we have our fixed monthly service charge. So again, by meter size, that change from meter size from a 5/8 inch to a 10 inch is based on the meter equivalency. And again, this gets back to our policy discussion on how much do we recover from fixed versus variable charges. This is that 30-70 split essentially yet. Again, remember, I don't go through and say it's exactly 30 and 70. It's how do we incur costs and what is that proportion? It did work out. I think it's 70.2 and 39.8. So really close, which was good based on the policy discussion we had. As you can see, those increase as we go out the 4 years. On the consumption side, when you look at this, single family, 3 tiers, 0 to 4, 4 to 16, 16 and over. To Commissioner Young's question, this is where you start seeing the differential in the different consumption rates based on the supply. So single family and multifamily are the same. However, the tiers are per dwelling unit for multifamily. So if you have 2 units, it doubles 4 to 8, 0 to 8 is your first tier as an example. But you can see how those costs have adjusted, from 0 to 4, 4 to 16, and over 16. Again, based on how we are providing water to those tiers. Recycled water down in the middle, yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead, you're hitting on recycled water.
Okay.
I'm going to ask you, why are those rates going up
So-
higher than the rates in the initial tiers?
Yeah, so part of that is those costs for recycled water are specific to recycled water. And so as we looked at that, that is not only the operation and maintenance side, there's a little sliver of capital component in there as well. And so that's just being driven up as part of that. It's our first year adjustment. That fiscal year 25 is really the big change, and then it's going up at the system average. But that is a change from prior years' costs. Our denominator, or our recycled water assumptions, are essentially the same as the last study, how much we're going to sell, but our costs have gone up a bit more, just as costs have changed. On the commercial industrial side, and you'll see this on the next slide as well, you'll see up to allotment and over allotment. That allotment is based on each unique customer, and it's worked on with the customer to develop what that base use is going to be. So you can see that that first up to allotment, or that first tier, is fairly minimal. And then when they go over their allotment, then we're up basically in that tier 3 range for our residential customers going forward. Same with our irrigation. Here's our irrigation ag, irrigation rec, and irrigation urban. So again, to our prior discussion, this is where you start seeing the change in the cost of providing the type of water supply. Looking at irrigation ag, it's all groundwater. It's $5.13 for up to their budget. Again, a unique budget for each of these customers based on how much water they should be using for their irrigable area. Irrigation rec now starts picking up a higher component of the cost based on surface water. And then irrigation urban, again, adding those overall costs in based on where we receive our water from. So you can see those changes in each of those. And then the over budget, again, ties to our third tier or highest cost of water. Commissioner Keller?
Yes, a quick question. How often are the budgets evaluated for a particular user like these?
We're going to phone a friend.
Chair Commission, Dana Hoffenberg, Water Resources Analyst. So the budgets they update constantly every month. So they're based on the irrigated area of the property, which is information that is supplied to us either by the applicant. We did do some surveys over many years where we would actually physically go out and measure landscaped areas if we saw that the water use wasn't really being in line with their budget. The budgets are also based on real-time weather data. So we have a weather station, a Simus weather station out at the golf course. So in the summer, when days are longer, hotter, drier, when it's windier, they get a larger budget. In the winter, when it's more wet, when it's darker, cooler, their budget goes down. So the only thing that we do rely on our customers to communicate with us on is if they're making big landscaping changes and if they are changing the irrigated area of their property. Otherwise, the budgets are pretty evergreen, I guess you could say. Yeah.
And something I didn't mention, on our allotment for commercial and industrial, that's actually based on their actual use for January to June, and that sets their budget. And again, that's something that is reviewed as well going through this process on a continual basis with those customers. So what does this look like? Here's our single family bill impact. Again, it's based on all water use going through that meter. So we brought it up to 16. Again, on the wastewater side, we cap at 8. But we have our present rate in the blue on the left, our proposed rate in the red on the right. And you can see that typical customer, 8, right in the middle. It's about a $6 per month increase in their bill. As you use more, obviously a greater increase, but again, a larger bill. On our multifamily side, again, fairly limited on the individually metered multifamily, fairly limited consumption. We did bring this up to 8. It's very rare that we see those individually metered up on that level, but wanted to provide that scale. Again, in the 4 in the middle is our typical maximum use for those individuals, and that's about a $5 a month increase.
Excuse me. What are the numbers on the bottom? Is that the 0, 2, 4, 6, 8?
Oh, thank you.
Months?
HCF, sorry.
Thank
you. I
Thank
didn't
you.
even see
Okay.
that. That's their use, yes. We will fix that. So what does this look like on a combined bill? At the beginning of this, Mr. Hagmark talked about, again, this whole process is going to be combined with solid waste. So here's a typical customer combined bill, the bill they get from the city, which includes our water bill in the blue on the bottom, our wastewater bill, the green in the middle, solid waste, the yellow towards the top, and then the UUT at the top, the little blue sliver up there. With the proposed adjustments for fiscal year 25, a customer using 8 HCF with the 65-gallon trash, green waste, recycled, one time a week pickup, that bill would go from $241.65 to $253.31. So $11.66 change, or a 4.8% change. Now, part of that is driven by, in this first year for fiscal year 25, that's only a 1.3 increase on the solid waste side for single-family customers. South Coast comparison, excuse me, for the wastewater customers. So here we see our 2 single-family users, our 4 HCF on the left or 8 HCF on the right. City of Santa Barbara and the dark green on the left. So, right about just under $50 for our proposed rate in fiscal year 25 for the 4 HCF, and up to our $66 in the right-hand slide for 8. Again, just a note, the dark bars here, Goleta, Montecito, Carpinteria, those are their fiscal year 25 rates that are going to be in place. Summerland, we're confirming to see if they do have a fiscal year 25 change in their rates. But there are some of these agencies also going through a rate study as well, so those may change in the future. Maybe not in 25, but probably coming up into that fiscal year 26 timeframe. Again, go ahead, Mr. Hagmark.
I was going to say, Commissioner Young, you can kind of see here how even despite the different water use with these other sanitary agencies, they're the same. They just charge a fixed fee. Mm-hmm.
On the water side, again, similar comparison, our 4 HCF and our 8 HCF. So again, dark is the city projected for fiscal year 25, and then we have Goleta, Montecito Water, and Carpinteria Valley Water District. And again, for Goleta and Carpinteria, the fiscal year 25 plan, Montecito is going through a process, so they will be looking at their rates as well as they go forward. So still here, very comparable to these other agencies with our typical customer use. And then on our apartment or condo, these are our individually metered multifamily customers. So again, you see the change per month for fiscal year ‑25. This excludes solid waste. These customers don't get an individual solid waste bill. And so it's just water, wastewater, and UUT. And so you can see about a $9 change, 9.4%. Again, that change in those overall customers. And then how these individually metered apartments or condos compare, again, using 4 HCF on the wastewater side. Again, you can see on Goleta, it's the same rate it was for the single family. They're all charged on that flat rate. And the same caveat here with as they're going through rate study processes and confirming rates going forward. And then on the water side for our apartment and condo or individually metered customers using our 4 HCF. So again, very comparable, not that these are how we set rates, but to give you an idea of how this compares to other local agencies. And then finally, on the commercial side, this is a combined water and wastewater bill impacts. And so you can see for those similar agencies we had before, for the city of Santa Barbara, water and wastewater versus Ventura, Solvang, or San Luis Obispo. On the left is our median 6 HCF. They'd be getting that minimum bill on the wastewater side. Or our high user, the 80 HCF for our hotel and lodging customer use. Again, fairly comparable, but again, some of these agencies have a fixed or flat rate per customer type, so it doesn't matter how much water they may use as part of that on the sewer side, wastewater side. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Cook to close this out.
So we understand that these proposed rates are pretty high. And so we are heightening our level of outreach due to these abnormally high increases. And we've put together some key messages and talking points to address the most common questions and the misinterpretations that we're seeing out there from customers. So we want to educate as much as we can with our outreach. And then we do have our Prop 218 notice, and I believe, included that as a supplement in your package. So we have the 218 notice for wastewater, for water, and then we also have a supplemental that we're going to ask for feedback on from you guys today. And then we will do our public webinar at the end of May. It will be a webinar, May 22nd, 6 o'clock, generally 6 to 7, 6 to 7:30. So this is an example of our Prop 218 customer notice. It has all of our legal jargon on there, plus our rates.
I understand that this requires to have legal jargon, but it's daunting to even a scientist. So I don't know if we can we can add some graphical information. Just your like some of the examples that we gave for a typical, residential customer, this is how this is going to go with a graphical interpretation, because it's tough,
I would agree, and a lot of this is determined by the state. Like, you must state all these things in here, and we're trying to keep it concise, and that's one of the reasons we've tried to develop a supplemental to go with it. Like, do we want to then, do we want to try and clean this up, or do we want to say, this is what the state requires, and here's what we do? We're open, I think, trying to figure that out.
Joshua, one thing, don't call the supplemental. Do the public information on the front sheet, and then all the details on the second sheet might be an approach.
Better way, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Water rates for dummies to begin with.
Everybody loves the dummies.
Yeah.
The Cliff Notes. Yeah, exactly.
Wastewater cliff notes.
And that one graphic, this one, I don't know if it's slide 35 or whatever, but just that shows the difference, just one graphic showing that it's only going to be a couple dollars or under $10, something like that is helpful.
Okay. And that is the difference in fiscal year 25. So that's that first year difference. And then from there on, it's going to be that revenue requirement.
And
Where does this get posted besides our website?
it's mailed to every household.
Mailed to every household, okay.
Yeah.
So yes, you should have the April, it should have an April on the top of it for the supplemental information. And so we'll go through that and in a couple of minutes and see if you have any edits or suggestions on that. I mean, the feedback is good so far with the graphics.
And we do have some time till, when do we need to get their final feedback on this?
We are presenting this to council, and so we would prefer to have this feedback by end of day tomorrow.
So if you, have any suggestions or edits to this, because this we have flexibility with. This is a city informational packet. We're trying to figure out, again, we'll probably reuse many pieces of this, but this will go out with the rate notice. And so if you have other suggestions about other ways we might present the information, we would love to hear from you on that.
And we may be a little bit flexible on that, but we need to get the feedback from you. We need to talk to CATS, have them make those edits. Then we need to review it and then send it out for review for our council policy, for our council review.
I would recommend that the message be, why are the rates going up the way they are, so that's clear why the rates are going up, how much they're going up, and an example, a graphical example, so people can understand it. And then in terms of some explanation about these resources for affordability, because those are the people that are going to be the most concerned. So I think that would be the three messages that I think would be the most important to have in the front part, not the supplemental.
Do you think, I mean, this information for the presentation today is literally coming in at the last minute as we're putting together, especially our comparables to our neighboring agencies. Is that valuable? I mean, someone asks someone to pay a lot. Do you care what your neighbors are paying at that point? Just feedback, or do you want to just stay focused on us and why we need to
I
do it?
wouldn't be super worried about what Montecito or, Summerlin or whatever is paying. I do on the supplemental or somewhere. Are you? Sorry.
There are two more slides.
Yeah,
Okay, we have the proposed
No, you're right.
next steps in the timeline. So we are today at Water Commission, and then on the 9th of April, we will be going to Council and to Finance Committee before that, and we will be going with solid waste. So that's going to be the full package for our utility rate notice. And then once we get approval, if we get approval, we will mail the notices at the end of April. We'll have our webinar near the end of May. And then we'll have our rate hearing at council on the 25th of June with adoption on the 2nd of July. Okay, so the recommendations are to receive the presentation, and then to recommend that council set a public hearing date for that June 25th hearing date, and recommend that council direct staff to have that notice of public hearing and send that out to customers. Okay, now we can get your feedback.
Anyone? Yeah, please.
So first, I have some questions, I guess, and then so one question. Maybe this is a policy question, but why don't we want our commercial comparison to be more in line with Solvang or San Luis Obispo or Carp or Summerlin? Like, why are we so much lower? I mean, it's a nice, like, oh, look, we're paying less, but like, why is that a policy decision that,
No, it should be a good question. It's a cost. It's right, our cost of services. This is what it costs to serve those customers.
Okay.
Now, the difference in some cases is how our rate is structured. That can sometimes vary on these as we look at these. And I know I'm on the single family, but it's still the same example. On wastewater, it depends on, is it a flat fixed charge, or is it a fixed charge plus a volume charge? Or is it a volume charge by category? And that is one thing we saw this time, is that commercial class, your typical commercial, is going up more than everybody else this time because of those changes we've seen since last time. So I think, and it's a change I'm seeing in a lot of places. As our high strength customers come down on their strength, the costs distribute differently, right? Proportionally across to everybody. Commercial or domestic commercial customers tend to be picking that up because they still are a fairly high volume per customer component of that.
Thanks. And then I had never thought about this before. So how is it measured? So the actual volume and strength is measured at each home? Or-
So, no. So for our typical our single family, multifamily, and commercial, and commercial high strength, it's based on their metered water use. But we do have assumptions built in based on the typical strength of those customers' wastewater.
Okay, so that's
Just industry
distributed.
standards.
So it wouldn't be like if a home used low-flow toilets, that then, I mean. so I
They
guess
would
what I'm
see
getting
that
at-
then.
So both of those costs would go down, both the water
Yep.
and the wastewater cost, which I think is a really important point, that water conservation doesn't just save you money on the water rate, but it decreases your wastewater, which I didn't realize before
Correct.
today. And I think that's maybe a way to incentivize using less water also, that it could bring them both
I mean,
down.
that is really powerful. And I mean, that's been something that the Water Commission and Council have, I mean, before my time had said, we really want to drive home this message that conservation is the direction we want to go. And it was, they attached it to wastewater, which if you look at a lot of our neighbors do not. They just do a flat fixed fee. It doesn't matter how much water you use. They just, and that's accepted. That's a accepted way to do wastewater. But that's not how we've done it here. And we kind of have that. So it really is, yeah, you're looking at when you save 1 HCF, it's a pretty significant savings because you get it also in wastewater.
It might be time to sort of reboot that message, because that's not something I knew. I don't know if maybe that's common knowledge or not, but I don't think, when you hear complaints about the water rates going up, but we're conserving so much, I mean, I think that part of that messaging about it brings down your wastewater bill too would be, I don't know, it might be maybe to highlight. So that's something I realized. So then I'm just wondering, so what would it look like if we made the rates what they needed to be for our cost of service, and then we had a robust low-income assistance program? And I think we've been sort of waiting for these two reports to come together, and that's where maybe they come together. So instead of keeping everything lower we see it doesn't cost burden as much in some areas. What if we just made them what they needed to be, and then would we still come out?
So I don't think our maximum proposed rates would change. What would change is we'd have so remember, under Prop 218, we can't take rate revenues and subsidize another subset of customers.
Right.
So what would happen is our rates would stay the same because our costs don't change, but we'd have an outside fund or funding, other monies would come in, and then you could reduce the bill to those customers. So the rate wouldn't generate the same revenue, but we'd have supplemental revenue coming in to fill that void.
Just want to make sure if we're heading in that direction, which I think is like the way to go, then I don't want to shave too much down on what we actually need to provide services.
So one
to
of the
try
things
and
that
bring-
I think, can consider next time is if we do get some type of affordability program like this. So in addition to what we do for UUT, this would be, say, for example, we make an effort to reduce the fixed charge to those who qualify. Let's just go down that road. And the funding source comes from penalty fees that are coming in. So we take that, say, $500,000 that's coming in from penalty fees, and we're going to apply it to the fixed meter charge. Next time we go through, we had that conversation. Right now, 30% of our revenue comes in from the fixed meter charge. The Water Commission and Council may feel like, for rate stability, we want to increase that because now we have an affordability program that helps anybody with that fixed meter charge. Just an example. Lots of missing little pieces in there to put together, but conceptually.
Okay, thank you. I think that's, since they're both coming together now, and we've worked really hard to bring the rates down as much as possible, but I don't want to bring them down so much that we can't deliver services. And then a comment on the rate notice, just on the front matter piece. So I think it's really powerful about the water main replacement. I think some homeowners think it's really powerful about the water main replacement, but I don't think most people whose rates are going to go up care so much about keeping up with the water main replacement. I think maybe messages like clean, safe drinking water from your tap every day whenever you turn it on, kind of thing. Or, you know, safe for your kids to use, safe for you to use. Like that's, I think, and available water is maybe, I don't know, messaging wise. If you're going to every household, I'm not sure the big message of water main replacement is as touches as many people in the same way. And I think also the emphasis on percentages is kind of rough, because if we're already lower than our neighbors and we're doing a percentage increase of already lower than our neighbors, it might look like the number is higher. You know, so say, I'll pick on Montecito. You know, their rates are already much higher. If they do a 10% increase on that, that's a much bigger impact. So for we keep talking about it in terms of percentages, but I think that gives a really misleading impact to the actual bill. Not misleading, but it's not a good comparison in other ways. So I think any time that you put actual dollars on there, like you did in the cover sheet there, like the cost of, you know, a gallon of milk and gas and that kind of thing, it's really helpful as opposed to any kind of percentage comparisons. Yeah, thank you.
No, I agree with the comment on the water main replacement issue. Keep it simple, clean, safe, reliable. That covers water main replacement, obviously, in the generic sense.
So I will respectfully disagree with my colleagues. I don't think we should lose that part of the message. I think that's important. Almost everybody that I talk to that knows anything about rates are going up again, they always gravitate towards, but we got lots of water. You know, they just have this misconception about what does it cost to really deliver water. So, I mean, I agree we don't need to put in the comparisons with the other agencies in the area. That is unnecessary. That's useful for us to have in our analysis, but, you know, the public can, if they want that, they can get it. It's there. But I think that messaging on cost almost should come out close to the top in terms of why are rates going up. And I think that's really important. So,
Can I add on to that?
of course.
So I think something that is very obvious to everyone in this room,
Yeah.
but is not very obvious to most of the general public, and when I say it, you guys are gonna be like, yeah, everybody knows that, but not everybody knows that, is how close the cost of water delivery to, you know, everyone's house is tied to the cost of power. Right? So like in this room, when you're like, yeah, power rates go up, everyone's like, right, so water rates go up, but that is not the association that most people, because I too have conversations with people that are like, yeah, it rained, Cachuma's full, why does it cost so much? And simply just the cost of operating is aggressively, you know, very deeply tied to the cost of power. And that isn't in any of the messaging. And I truly think it's because for everyone in here, that's like, yeah, of course it is. But that is not, most people do not put those two things together. And I know that that sounds crazy, and I don't know the easiest way to be like, hey, everybody, so water takes a lot of power to get to your house. So, but like literally, I've said this to people that like work in conservation or whatever, like, why is water rates going up? And I'm like, well, are your power rates going up? And they're like, yeah. And I'm also, how much power does it take to get water to your house? And they're like, oh, okay. Like that's a pretty, and that's just, it's very simple, and everybody knows it's happening as well, right? So it's like the operating costs truly are increasing in a way that is completely out of the control of anyone in the city or, you know, whatever. So that I think is a key point, just in terms of like, yes, the water is still here, but like, how does it get from Cachuma to your house? Is that free?
You know, I think two pie charts of costs, one that's 5 years ago versus where we're at right now.
Yeah.
And in that pie chart, we have pieces of pie
we're getting
related
pie.
to, infrastructure replacement, maintenance, things like that, electrical costs, and then the treatment costs, and I think would be really helpful.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think.
And then people can see where are the costs increasing,
Right.
what components. But also in this discussion, would it be helpful if some of us, or all of us on the commission, pen an article that we could, publish in Newshawk or, Independent?
I think it could be helpful. I think people are getting information in many different formats these days, and it's always interesting to try and figure out how best to connect with everybody. Commissioner Snyder, when we talked about this during our check-in, she had mentioned maybe a joint letter from the Water Commission, given the controversy here. And it seems that you're all generally on the same page right now. That might be really good, and sometime maybe in the May timeframe. So once the letter goes out, and then figuring out how best to, I think, get that letter out there. I mean, there's the letters to the editor, and there's certain people that are still reading newspapers and doing that. And then is there other avenues to also put that same message out? And again, talking from a group that is independent of staff and the council and advisors on water issues. So I think that could be really helpful, honestly, kind of daylighting certainly your guys' expertise. And we're happy to help in providing information. I don't know if one of you wants to take the lead or with that, and we can work with you and then bring it back. For example, we could bring it back in April for the whole commission to review, or you can direct a subcommittee to work on it and call it good. Lots of different options there. I'm welcome to feedback.
I'll volunteer to draft something, put it together, and then share it with everybody, and we can have input on it.
Do you have any more comments or questions from the committee? Do we have public comment?
No public comment.
Okay.
All right, you ready for a motion?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have I'll move to adopt recommendations B and C in staff's report on page 44.
Second.
Stu?
Sorry,
Oh.
B and C, but not A, B, C?
A is just to receive a presentation.
Yeah.
But it's for them, no, it's for the
It's for
council.
the
or
council.
Maybe I'm getting it wrong.
Oh, okay.
Just for us, we recommend it to us,
You're recommending this whole thing on
to the council, no? Yeah, so it has to be, it's to
Okay.
Yeah,
council.
let's do it.
So we'll include A in that motion.
Accepted by the seconder.
Okay.
Let's have a vote on all of it.
Commissioner Young,
Yes.
Commissioner Davis,
Yes.
Commissioner Keller,
Yes.
Chair Cooney.
Yes.
Chair Cooney, unfortunately, I have to leave right
Yes, I
now.
know,
so
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Glad we got your comments in before you had to take off. Okay, we're moving on to the Water Resources Managers Report.
Excellent. All right. Well, let's dive in here. And again, you guys can look through the packet, but just wanted to point out the last 2 months we're 10% lower than what we had planned to sell and as far as water or produce. This is a production, not a sales. So production, given the wetter than normal conditions, and we'll see how that translates. Again, these are not large water sale months, but we'll keep an eye on the revenues there, and we'll report back here in the spring when we have more detail. I thought was another one that was interesting on wastewater, and I again haven't had a chance to drill into this, but just the influent flows to El Estero for the month of February. Wow, those are some big numbers there. Again, I
Yeah,
playing a big
infiltration.
part in there. It's inflow and infiltration into the sewer system. This means more chemicals. This is more pumping. This is really, I'm excited to wrap up this I&I study and really have some game plan for going after it. Unfortunately, we had to move out some of the funding to go after some of these I&I projects, but that's significant. What's that? Almost 30-40% increase in flows. So I thought that was noteworthy. Then I just wanted to talk a little bit about what we've been doing. Let's see, I've got several things here. So we do have a new landslide in town. Yeah, I know. It's an interesting thing to talk about. Up on Las Alturas, so the top of Las Alturas, fascinating to me that this landslide is laying dormant for as long as I can remember. We've had some pretty significant rain in this community, and the houses that, in particular, there's one house that has been red tagged. But it's been there, for 50 or 60 years. It's really unusual. And unfortunately, this landslide is impacting the city's wastewater mains in that area. There's about 12 houses that flow by gravity through that landslide. We were very fortunate that we had slip lined this particular clay pipe, so it has a liner inside it. And when this thing is moving fairly slowly, but it crimped it, and sewer flows backed up, but we did not have a spill. Collection staff are heroes and got in there and were able to suck out the manhole, and we're able to temporarily get a connection reestablished. But we're going to need now to figure out how to get these 12 properties past this landslide, both in a temporary fashion, which might likely going to mean some type of pump that grinds up their waste, puts it in a hose that goes over the top of the ground and across the slide, and then long-term trying to figure out how to go around the slide. So going to be expensive, going to be complicated, but we are working diligently on that. And the city is also bringing on a geologist to help advise us on it. I'm not sure at this point how deep this slide is. You might remember the Conejo slide. That slide is like 75 feet deep, so it's nearly impossible to really get beneath that. Hopefully this slide is something shallower and things can be done to stabilize it. We are embarking on a slip business case. So one of the things that we've noticed and we've been talking about with you all is we've been using this program for years, a carrot approach. Really, we're here to help you. We're here to help you. And for a portion of our customers, that works. We've got a growing list. We're now well over 1,000 customers who have said, yeah, thanks, but I'm not doing anything about my lateral. Whether I financially can't afford it or I don't want to, we can name the reasons, but that has impacts on spills because those private spills are increasing, and it has impacts on how and well we can maintain and avoid spills in our own system because they've got roots coming down their laterals. And so we're going to do a business case that looks at the SLIP program and really what we need to do in the future going forward. And if we did have to go to a more aggressive program of forcing people to deal with maintaining their infrastructure, how would we do that in a way that was thoughtful? Because the cost of maintaining your lateral is expensive. It's like replacing your roof. It's a really costly. So more to come on that. Big milestone for AMI. We've got 20% of our customers signed up. I'm just so excited for our team. Nice work out there, getting people signed up. We're going to be working on a new target and going out there. You're probably just seeing some of the new press release coming on that. We're going to be continuing to ramp that up. Any avenue we have to engage with our customers. Hey, do you know about this? Hey, we're going to get you signed up for this new program. So really excited about that. March 5th, we started a new 5-year term for desal operations contract. We had a nice little clause in our contract that said the city could unilaterally just extend the contract. So despite negotiations not going well, and them not happy with that. We're continuing to talk with them, and hopefully we hope we can come up with mutual terms that work. But in the meantime, we have a plan, at least for the next 5 years, to continue to have them. Yesterday I was at Ventura College. Their careers create a career fair. It was really good. We're going to be going to the Santa Barbara City College Career Fair coming up here in April. Just really trying to get out there. I was at the Santa Barbara South Coast Chamber of Commerce workforce work session, all with a bunch of techies there, all looking for microchip. But honestly, at the same day, we're looking for the same people. We're looking for locals who are interested in upskilling, who are interested in staying here. So it was a lively discussion, and so we're going to have some additional follow-ups to that. And let's see, looking to cancel June. I'm kind of giving my staff some direction to try and work around that. June's a busy month. We've got a lot going on at council, and I'm sure the Water Commission could use a break. So we are working with that. No promises yet, but right now it doesn't look like we have any agendas. Okay. And with that, here to answer any questions you may have.
No questions, but I wasn't here at the last meeting. And when I saw Sean sitting here, I had this, I don't know what, not a flashback, but a realization that I've never seen him in person before. And Dave told me, yes, we went through that at the last meeting, because he's always appeared on the monitor.
Yes.
So, hi, Sean.
Hi, very
Okay.
nice to see you all in person.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, well, if we're done with comments and questions, then we'll call this meeting to a close, and we will be back here in April on the 18th? 18th, all right.
Okay.
Fantastic.
Thanks.
See everyone then, thank you.